March 1625. A heavy rain falls over Theobald's house in Hertfordshire. King James I, the first Stuart King of England, lies dead. The Jacobean era has ended. From the shadows of his father's court steps a young man of 24. He is short, delicate in frame, and struggles with a stammer. But in his eyes there is a steel-hard conviction. This is Charles I. He does not view the crown as a job or a duty derived from the people. He views it as a sacred burden placed upon him by the Almighty. He believes he is answerable to no man, only to God. It is a belief that will cost him his throne. It is a belief that will cost him his head. Welcome to the tragedy of Charles Stuart. To understand the bloody civil war that will eventually engulf England, we must first look at the moment the crown touched his head and the immediate, disastrous choices that followed. To understand Charles, you must understand the world he inherited. Europe is burning. The 30 Years' War is raging on the continent, a brutal religious conflict between Catholics and Protestants. England, a staunchly Protestant nation, feels isolated and anxious. The English people are looking for a warrior king, a defender of the faith, someone to draw a sword against the Catholic powers of Spain and France. Instead, they get Charles.
Charles was a man of high aesthetic taste and deep personal piety, but he lacked the one thing a 17th-century monarch desperately needed: political intuition. His father, James, was known as the wisest fool in Christendom. He talked a lot, but he knew when to compromise. Charles did not know how to bend. He only knew how to break.
The trouble begins almost immediately, and it begins with a wedding. Before his father's body is even cold, Charles finalizes a marriage treaty with France. His bride is Henrietta Maria, the sister of the French king Louis XIII. She is 15 years old. She is vibrant. She is French. And, most dangerously of all, she is Catholic. In 1625, marrying a Catholic princess is not just a personal choice, it is a political landmine. The English Parliament is terrified. Will the new queen raise their children as Catholics? Will the king relax the laws against papists in England? When Henrietta Maria arrives in Dover, she brings with her a retinue of priests and servants holding mass in the royal court. The English public is scandalized. The honeymoon is over before it begins. June 1625. Charles calls his first parliament. He needs money. Wars are expensive, and Charles wants to intervene on the continent to restore his brother-in-law, the Elector Palatine, to his lands. He expects Parliament to do what they have always done: vote him a generous subsidy and grant him the right to collect customs duties, known as tonnage and poundage, for the duration of his life. It has been tradition for nearly 200 years. Henry VIII got it. Elizabeth I got it. James I got it. But the Parliament of 1625 is different. They are suspicious. They look at the king's Catholic wife. They look at the king's best friend and advisor, the Duke of Buckingham, a man widely hated for his incompetence and vanity. And they decide to send a message.
Parliament makes a stunning move. Instead of granting Charles tonnage and poundage for life, they grant it for 1 year only. 1 single year. It was a massive insult. They were effectively putting the king on a performance review. They were saying, "We don't trust you, and we certainly don't trust the Duke of Buckingham."
Charles is furious. He takes this as a personal attack on his honor and his divine right. In his mind, Parliament does not give him power. They merely supply the funds he is owed by God's will. By restricting his funds, they are restricting his sovereignty. The tension snaps in Oxford. The plague is ravaging London, so the Parliament moves to the university city. But the change of scenery does not improve the mood. The members of Parliament, led by vocal critics like Sir John Eliot, demand an inquiry into the Duke of Buckingham before they will release any more money. They want to know why English money is being wasted on failed military expeditions. Charles is faced with a choice: abandon his friend Buckingham to the wolves and get his money, or stand by his friend and lose his funding. Loyalty is one of Charles's few virtues, but in politics it is a fatal flaw. He refuses to let Parliament touch Buckingham. On August 12, 1625, Charles dissolves his first Parliament. It has been less than 5 months since he became king. The lines are drawn. The king has no money, but he has his pride. Parliament has the money, but they have no trust. This is the beginning of a pattern that will repeat, escalating in intensity for 17 years. A king who demands obedience, and a Parliament that demands accountability. But Charles is determined to rule, with or without them. If Parliament won't give him money legally, he will have to find other ways to take it. 1626. The King of England is broke. Charles I is now at war with Spain, a war he wanted, a war the people wanted, but a war Parliament refused to fund. The humiliation is total. The English fleet, poorly equipped and led by the incompetent Duke of Buckingham, has failed disastrously to capture the Spanish treasure fleet at Cadiz. Ships return to Plymouth with rotting sails and starving crews. The soldiers are unpaid. They roam the English countryside, begging and stealing. Charles needs money immediately to keep his government running. But having dissolved Parliament, he has no legal way to get it. So he decides to break the law to save the state. He initiates the forced loan.
The forced loan was exactly what it sounded like. Commissioners were sent to every wealthy man in the kingdom demanding they lend money to the crown. There was no promise of repayment. If you refused, you were not just saying no to a loan, you were defying the king. It was a test of loyalty.
The country is outraged. This is extortion disguised as patriotism. 76 prominent gentlemen refuse to pay. Among them are men who will become legends of English liberty. Charles does not hesitate. He orders them thrown into prison. No trial, no charges, just the king's command. This triggers a legal crisis known as the Five Knights case. The prisoners demand habeas corpus, the ancient right to know why they are being detained. The king's lawyers argue a terrifying precedent. The king has a prerogative power to imprison anyone at any time for reasons of state known only to him. The judges, fearful for their own jobs, rule in the king's favor. Charles has won the battle, but he is losing the war for the hearts of his people. He is no longer seen just as a misguided monarch. He is beginning to look like a tyrant. By 1628, the money from the forced loan runs out. Charles is forced to do the one thing he hates most. He calls Parliament back. But the men who return to Westminster are not in a giving mood. They are the very men Charles had imprisoned. They are angry, organized, and led by the brilliant legal mind, Sir Edward Coke. Before they grant a single penny, they draft a document that will echo through history, influencing the American Revolution 150 years later. The Petition of Right. It demands 4 things: no taxation without Parliament, no imprisonment without cause, no quartering of soldiers in private homes, no martial law in peacetime. Charles is cornered. He needs the money to save his crumbling foreign policy. Through gritted teeth, on June 7, 1628, the king sits on his throne and speaks the French phrase that makes it law. Soit droit fait comme il est désiré. Let right be done as it is desired. London explodes in celebration. Bonfires are lit. The people believe the king has finally listened. But the celebrations are premature. August 1628, Portsmouth. The Duke of Buckingham is preparing for another military expedition, this time to France. The Duke is the most powerful man in England and the most hated. The public calls him the grievance of grievances. In a crowded inn, a disillusioned army officer named John Felton steps out of the shadows. He has read the Parliament's complaints. He believes he is doing God's work. He approaches the Duke. With a single thrust, Felton plunges a knife into Buckingham's chest. The Duke cries out, "The villain has killed me," and collapses, blood pouring from his mouth. The Duke of Buckingham is dead.
The reaction to Buckingham's death reveals the absolute divide in the country. The public rejoiced. They drank to Felton's health in the streets. Poets wrote verses celebrating the assassin. But Charles was devastated. He threw himself onto his bed and wept uncontrollably for days. He was 27 years old, and he had lost his only friend, his mentor, his father figure.
The people celebrated the death of the man the king loved. Charles would never forgive them for it. A hardened, bitter king emerges from mourning. He blames Parliament's rhetoric for inspiring the murder. The Petition of Right? He ignores it. He continues to collect taxes illegally. He promotes the very religious figures Parliament despises. January 1629. Parliament meets again. The atmosphere is toxic. The members realize the king has no intention of honoring his word. On March 2nd, the situation explodes. The king orders the Speaker of the House to adjourn the session, to shut Parliament down so they cannot vote on new resolutions condemning his actions. As the Speaker tries to rise from his chair to leave, two radical members of Parliament, Denzil Hollis and Benjamin Valentine, physically grab him. They shove the Speaker back down into his chair and hold him there. Hollis shouts, "God's wounds, you shall sit till we please to rise." It is revolution. While the King's guards bang on the locked doors of the House of Commons, Sir John Eliot reads out 3 resolutions condemning the King's religious innovations and his illegal taxes. The House votes aye in a roar of defiance. Only then do they unlock the doors. Charles is done. He dissolves Parliament immediately. He has Sir John Eliot thrown in the Tower of London, where he will eventually die a prisoner. Charles looks at his courtiers and makes a vow. He will rule alone. He will not call another Parliament for 11 long years. The personal rule has begun. The king has won total power. But in the silence of a Parliament-free England, the pressure is building. And when it finally bursts, it will not be with words, but with war. For 11 years, silence falls over the Palace of Westminster. The doors of Parliament remain locked. This is the period historians call the personal rule, or to his enemies, the 11 years tyranny. On the surface, England is peaceful. While Europe bleeds in the 30 Years' War, England is prosperous. The king is happy. He is reunited with his wife, Henrietta Maria, and they build a court of high culture, art, and strict religious ceremony. But beneath the velvet surface, the foundation is rotting. Without Parliament to grant taxes, Charles revives ancient, forgotten laws to squeeze money from his subjects. The most hated of these is ship money.
Ship money was traditionally a tax levied on coastal towns during wartime to build a navy. Charles, however, levied it on everyone, even inland towns, during peacetime. It was a clever legal loophole, but it felt like robbery. A Buckinghamshire landowner named John Hampden refused to pay. He lost his case in court, but he became a hero to the nation. The people realized, if the king can take my property whenever he wants, do I actually own anything?
But it is not taxes that finally break the king's rule. It is religion. Charles, alongside his severe Archbishop of Canterbury, William Laud, decides to bring the Presbyterian Scots into line. He demands they use the English Book of Common Prayer. July 23, 1637. St. Giles Cathedral, Edinburgh. The Dean opens the new prayer book. A market woman named Jenny Geddes screams, "Devil take you! Will you say Mass in my ear?" and hurls her wooden stool at the Dean's head. The church erupts into a riot. The riot becomes a rebellion. The rebellion becomes a war. The Scots sign a national covenant swearing to resist the king's religious changes to the death. Charles marches an army north to crush them, but his ship money army is poorly paid, poorly led, and has no will to fight. They are humiliated by the Scots. Bankrupt and defeated, Charles has nowhere left to turn. In 1640, with a heavy heart, he does the unthinkable. He calls Parliament back. The Long Parliament assembles in November 1640. They are not here to help the king. They are here to dismantle him. Led by the relentless John Pym, they strike hard. They arrest Archbishop Laud. They arrest the king's new right-hand man, the Earl of Strafford. They pass a law stating the king can never again dissolve Parliament without its own consent. The king is stripped of his power, piece by piece. To save his own life and the safety of his family, he signs the death warrant for his loyal servant, Strafford. It is a betrayal that will haunt Charles's conscience until his dying day. Tension reaches a breaking point in late 1641. A Catholic rebellion explodes in Ireland, with reports of thousands of Protestants massacred. Who will lead the army to crush it? Parliament is terrified that if they give Charles an army, he will turn it on them first. Trust has evaporated. Rumors fly that Parliament plans to impeach the Queen. Charles decides he has retreated enough. It is time to gamble everything. The King of England walks into the House of Commons. He is accompanied by 400 armed soldiers who wait at the door. He enters the chamber alone. He intends to arrest 5 leading members of Parliament, including John Pym and John Hampden, for treason. He walks to the Speaker's chair. The members stand in stunned silence. No king has ever entered the Commons uninvited. Charles scans the room. The 5 seats are empty. The men had been warned and fled down the river moments before. The king smiles nervously. He says, "I see all the birds have flown." As he leaves the chamber, the silence is broken. Members cry out, "Privilege! Privilege!" The gamble has failed. The king has violated the sanctity of Parliament and has nothing to show for it. London turns against him. Fearing for their lives, Charles and his family flee the capital. For months, both sides gather weapons and recruits. Negotiations fail. There is no turning back. August 22nd, 1642. Nottingham. On a windy, rainy evening, Charles I orders the royal standard raised. It is a medieval declaration of war against his own subjects. Even the weather is against him. That very night, a fierce storm blows the standard down into the mud. It is a dark omen. The political arguing is over. The war of words has ended. The war of 3 kingdoms has begun. Brother will fight brother. Father will fight son. And before it ends, the king who believed he answered only to God will have to answer to the executioner.